AJ here with ProLine. Today we're going to go over how automations work for campaigns in ProLine. So let's go over here to this re-roof follow-up campaign. We're going to go up to the right-hand corner. Now what we're going to see is that there's three little gears here that are green, and that tells us that automations are currently active for this campaign. If we scroll over to the right, we can see on this sold campaign that there's no current automations active there, and so it's grayed out. But if we go back to here, we can see that the automations are active for this campaign. Now, if we click on those three green gears, it's going to open up the automation sequence that's associated with this campaign. And here at the top, it's telling us there are 4 contacts currently in the campaign, which we can see on the campaign page. And then also we have this pause button here. So automations are currently on, which means that we can pause them and temporarily turn them off if we want to. So we can hit pause. Now we're going to see a play button. So if we want to turn automations back on, we're just going to hit that. And now automations are back on for this campaign. Now, what happens when a contact gets added to this campaign? So if a contact gets added to re-roof follow-up, the contact is going to start at the very top of this automation sequence, and it's going to work its way down over time. The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to wait 5 minutes. Now, this is fully customizable to this step, and it's associated with this first send email step. So if I click on this send email step, I can now see that I have the ability to change what this delay is. In fact, I could even take this away, make it 0, save this email. And now when I close the step, it's just going to say wait for start. And even if I wanted to actually send the email immediately, then I could go down here and change the start time option. So this is a very important aspect of how these automation steps work, is there is a delay period, and this is the delay period up here. So you can choose what amount of time ProLine should wait before running that step. And then there's also additional options that control the exact time of day, and not just the time of day, but also even the time of week that a automation is going to run. And so if we go down here, we can see the first option here is start at optimal time. This is the option that we recommend for most sales follow-up specifically, and for a lot of emails and text messages you're going to want to send using optimal time. This draws on all the data that ProLine has on each contact. That includes email opens, text message responses, email responses, calls. It gathers all that information and creates a profile on that contact that tries to identify the best time of day to contact that particular contact. And ProLine is then going to send this email at the time of day that it believes that contact is most likely to respond. And this really increases the effectiveness of specifically sales follow-up, but it can be used in other ways as well. And so the way this is going to work, if we have starts at optimal time, and say we do have the 5 minutes on here and we save this, then what's going to happen is when a contact gets added to re-roof follow-up, the re-roof follow-up campaign, it's going to wait a minimum of 5 minutes. And then ProLine is going to use that data that it has at its disposal to determine the best time of day to send this email to that contact. And then we can see that the next step after send email is send text, and it is set to starts immediately. By making this second step here starts immediately, what we've essentially done is made it so that this email and text message go out at the same time. So it's going to ProLine's going to send that email using the optimal time calculations, and then it's going to turn around and immediately text as well. And you don't have to, you can set this up however you want to for your automations and your use case. And so if you want to send an email and then wait a few days and send the text at a different time, you absolutely can do that. But this is the way that most of our specifically sales follow-up templates are set up, where we're sending an email and a text together at the best time of day ProLine thinks it can reach out. So now we've covered 2 of these options: starts at optimal time and starts immediately. And now let's look at these other 2. So we also have the option of choosing a specific time of day that we want ProLine to contact this, or to send this this text message and run this step. And so we could say starts at, and we could make this 9:14 a.m. and we can even choose what day of the week we want this to run. So we can even say on Wednesdays. And so what this is going to do now is when the contact reaches this point in the sequence, ProLine is going to wait until the next time that it is 9:14 a.m. on a Wednesday to send that automation. Now this is not going to get used very often, but you might have something, a message that you specifically always want to go out on a certain day of the week. And if you want to do that, you can absolutely do that through ProLine. You just won't be able to use the optimal time calculations. You'll have to pick a specific time of day. Now, the last option here is a starts at a certain period of time, and then you can either choose hours or minutes before a specific custom date. There are 3 custom date fields in ProLine. These can be linked through various integrations or through Zapiers to events on Google Calendar maybe, or a appointment date and time in your CRM. And so by linking those date fields to those dates and times that you're working with, and then using this specific start option, you can actually have messages go out specific periods of time before that date and time of, say, an appointment. And of course, the most common application of this is if you have an inspection that you've scheduled with a customer and you want ProLine to send them a text and email an hour before or 2 hours before, reminding them of that upcoming appointment. We usually recommend sending a reminder 2 hours before and then also 15 minutes before. And I want to back out of here because we do have in this demo an actual appointment reminder sequence set up. And so this is kind of what that would look like. This is an example of how you might set up appointment reminders where you have an immediate email and text message that go out confirming the appointment. And it's going to pull in that custom date value into the actual message. So confirming the appointment and then waiting until 2 hours before the inspection to actually send that reminder, and then waiting 15 minutes before as well. Now, it is important to note that if these were switched, so if this said 15 minutes and this says 2 hours, what's going to happen is these messages are going to send 15 minutes before, and the contact's going to move down here, and it's going to say, oh, well, 2 hours already passed, and so ProLine's just going to skip these messages. And so that is an important thing to note with this starts a certain amount of time before a date or time, is that if you use that and then ProLine doesn't, it runs after that specific point that it was supposed to run has already occurred, then ProLine's just going to skip those messages. And ProLine is smart enough to know to actually skip both the text and the email. So now going back to this sales follow-up, re-roof follow-up campaign, let's look at the different step types that are available in ProLine. So if we go to send email, emails and texts are, of course, the most used step type in ProLine, but you absolutely can use the other type of automations that we've created. You can do things like assigning a contact. You can use this if you want to. You can even add multiple team members into this field, and you can do a round robin. This is really good for like speed to lead, for example, where you have a group of sales reps, and as leads are coming in through whatever lead sources, you might want them to sort of be responsible or divvy those up and be responsible for actually contacting them and getting the appointment scheduled. Or maybe you have an in-house, some people in your office and you have 2 or 3 of them and you want to round robin them so that no one person gets overwhelmed. It's a really good use case for that. You can also create a task. So we have a whole task system in ProLine, which we'll go over in another video. And so you can actually create tasks as part of these sequences. A really common application of this is in the process of this follow-up. Maybe you have an email and text follow-up here, and then waits 3 days, another email and text follow-up, and then maybe after that you want the sales rep on your team who's assigned to this contact to actually do a manual call. And so you might add a create task step and create a task for that sales rep that's assigned to them. They're going to get notifications and reminders about it to personally call that contact. We also have a lot of steps related to our different integrations. You can send contact information to Job Progress, for example, or Company Cam or Sumo Quote to actually input that into these other platforms. This just helps you avoid having to find other ways to link things together or using a bunch of zaps, stuff like that. Speaking of Zapier, you can actually trigger specific zaps from our automation sequences. So, for example, if you want to, you want to have some handwritten note service or gift basket service or some other service that we don't natively integrate with, but you want to be able to trigger those actions from ProLine's automation sequences, you can use this Zapier trigger step. And now that this Zapier trigger step exists, if you go use our Zapier app, there's actually a specific trigger for this, and you're going to be able to see this specific step as an option to trigger that zap. And then you can link it to whatever service that you want to be triggered when the contact reaches this step in the sequence. You can also use the pause sequence, add additional periods of wait time. This doesn't get used often, but it does provide some flexibility. Queued contacts is a really interesting step. This actually will have the effect of limiting the number of contacts that pass this step over time. So if we say start 30 contacts per day, this step, any contacts that reach this step in the automation sequence will then be scheduled out over time, no more than 30 per day. This is really useful for lead rehash type campaigns where you might have 1,000 or 500 contacts that your company has worked with over the years that are all lost, but you want to try to re-engage them, get some more business out of those leads. But rather than overwhelming your sales team by sending a massive volume of messages right off the bat, you can use a queue contact step to filter those down and have those rehash automations and messages go out gradually over time. Now let's go down and let's look at what happens when a contact reaches the end of a sequence. So as you can see, these sequences can be extremely long, and you can add some very long wait periods to these as well. And so actually this is to add additional steps, you go down, you press the plus button, and this will add a step at the bottom. It's added automatically as disabled. You can then pick what type of step you want it to be. These options right here, this one in the middle is a duplicate step option. So if you have, for example, an email and you've already put all the settings the way you like them and you want to add another one of these email steps, you can actually hit this duplicate button, hit duplicate, and now a copy of that email will be added to the bottom of the sequence. It will be added still as disabled, but if we hit send email, we'll see that those settings and information have been inputted for this step, and we can then save it. Lastly is this move step option here on the left. We click on this, we can actually choose a new place in the sequence for this step. We can send it to the beginning of the campaign, or we can place it after any other step currently in the sequence. So we're going to delete these 2 extra steps here since we don't need them. And then down, once the contact reaches the very end of the campaign, if the campaign is set to do nothing, then the contacts will just sit here at the bottom and nothing will happen. If you have it set to move to campaign, you can choose another campaign in your ProLine account, and ProLine will then move the contact to that other campaign once they've finished this one. A good use case for that is maybe this is a follow-up. This one is a follow-up campaign, but at the end of the follow-up, maybe you just want the contact to get moved to lost jobs, the lost jobs campaign, or to a rehash or some other campaign. You can also have ProLine just loop and repeat this automation sequence. This is a really good application for rehashes or for customer referral generation, where you just want to check in with this contact every 90 days, for example, and you just want that to go on indefinitely. And so maybe you have like 4 or 5 different sets of messages, and then you can have the whole thing loop. And so the messages are looping once every year or once every year and a half. And it's a really good way to stay in touch with contacts over time. And you can control what period of time that wait period is for. It's by default 1 day, but you could add 60 days, for example, and now ProLine's going to wait 60 days before looping. Lastly is this option right here, change campaign on text or call response. This, if a contact responds to a text and or calls while this campaign is running, you can have ProLine send the contact to the end of the campaign and move it to another campaign. This is really useful for review generation, for example, where you're asking for an online review, and those reviews that people are leaving may not show up immediately on Google Reviews, and or you might not see them. And there's no real way for ProLine to track those reviews being left, since the email is not made public when they leave the review. And so what we can set up instead is, in all the messages, we can say, hey, please let us know once you've left the review. And then when they do reply to those messages and say, yes, I left the review, then ProLine will automatically move them to another campaign and stop requesting them to leave that review. There's other applications as well. Typically, we don't recommend using this for follow-up or for appointment reminders, for example, but another use case might be speed to lead, where you're just trying to engage that contact and get them to respond, after which you don't want further speed to lead messages going out. And that pretty much covers it. This is how automations work in ProLine, and happy automating.